gelernt habe. Und Spiel mit dem Eurofighter. Ja, der Eurofighter kommt sich dann jetzt nicht nach Rauchanlage mit dem Smoke. Das sieht dann hier sehr schön. Man muss noch besser sehen, dass der Himmel heilt. Morgen soll das Wetter ja noch schöner werden, als es heute ist. Anlauf für Ali nimmt. Er ist mit ganz leise in diesem gigantische Modell. Jetzt möchte ich bei den lauten Applaus hören, den ich auf der Modellflugveranstaltung gehört habe.
Hey, alright, I'm Dave Powers and I'm into RC airplanes. And if you've clicked on this video, you probably are too, or at least want to get into RC airplanes. For those of us bitten by the flying bug, RC airplanes give us the feeling of fun, freedom, and accomplishment. And today, with the breakthrough of lithium battery technology, new durable foam, and smaller, more dependable electronics, the days of part-by-part balsa building that take months are over. That's right, if you know what you're doing, you can have an RC plane in the air by next weekend. With these new durable RC planes, this means that you can be flying year-round. You can fly at a local park, you can fly in your backyard. We even see a lot of guys flying on their lunch break. How do you like that? So why haven't you gotten into RC planes before? Is it because you think that it's too complicated, too expensive, or too hard? Because it's not. Are you afraid that you're going to buy the wrong parts, crash your plane the first time, and be out a few $100? That's a valid concern. But I'm here to tell you, if you have the right knowledge, the right education, you can be flying a park jet really fast. Let me give you some examples of normal people that have done just that. 10-year-old Evelyn was struggling to fly her first RC plane. She stumbled across our work, followed just a few of our pro tips, then got the right beginner plane and took it out and flew it the first time. Now her and her dad Tony enjoy flying RC planes together. 18-year-old Davis came across our work. He took the knowledge and got into experimental designs himself. He's constructed and flown several of his own builds now. He's had so much fun doing it, he's now off to college to study aeronautical engineering. 40-year-old Billy D found our work years ago, got into RC planes, got the hang of it real fast, so much so that he now flies the large-scale jets. That's right, the big boys. You see, when you know how to do this right, you can accelerate through the learning process. What takes most people months, or in my case, years, you can literally do in days. But You have to know the master steps how to do it. Now, I mentioned it took me 2 years to learn how to fly RC. Now, this is back in the 90s. I spent every weekend and days after school out on the field trying to learn to fly, and I couldn't get the hang of it. My problem was the same that most guys run into, and that is orientation. Plane would take off and be okay, but once it was coming at me, left was right and right was left, and I'd always turn the wrong way and roll over and crash, and that would be it. I was down at the hobby shop so much, they gave me a job there. And it was finally getting under the tutelage of expert RC guys that they started to reveal to me the pro tips that they follow. That's when I started to learn to fly. We then started showing others how to build and design planes on our videos on YouTube. That built into the largest RC YouTube channel. We have a forum now with thousands of members. I've now devoted a large part of my life teaching and showing other people how to get into this RC hobby. So here are the 3 biggest mistakes everyone makes getting into RC. Number 1, they buy the wrong plane. What happens is they get suckered into a deal that's too good to be true. It has an amazing scale plane. Usually it's a jet. If they can get it together, they take it off, fly it, crash it, smash it, it's done. Can't repair it. Even if they could, the plane is too unstable to learn how to fly on. You got to think like riding a bike. You got to build that mind-muscle connection. You got to think real pilots go through a lot of training to learn how to fly. These RC planes are trickier to learn to fly than real planes because of the orientation issue. Plus, they're much faster and much squirrelier than a full-size plane, so your reaction time needs to be much higher. So you need to have a plane that is built for that, that can take the crashes, is stable on the turns, and has its motor and electronics protected, so when you do crash, it can get up and fly again. And if it breaks, it needs to be field repairable. There's not a lot of planes that meet these specifications, so you got to make sure you have one of those. Number 2 is guys get the wrong parts. They'll usually cheap out on the radio controller, so the radio doesn't have a rudder, it doesn't have a throttle control, it doesn't have 2.4 gigahertz, so it's not very dependable frequency. And what happens is they're now under controlling the plane, and the plane goes out of control and crashes. Best case scenario, they have a successful flight with their cheap radio and their beginner plane. Now they want to fly another plane. They have to buy a whole other radio. They got to buy a whole other set of chargers and batteries and everything else. So now they're buying their electronics, they're buying their parts twice. You don't want to do that. You want to take the investment of buying the right parts and the right radio the first time, so your parts are interchangeable with your beginner planes as well as your intermediate and advanced planes. That's how we do it. That's how everyone else does it. Number 3, you have to be educated. You have to have preferably somebody at your local field show you all the little things you got to do. Now I'm talking there are hundreds of micro decisions you have to make. What hole on the push rod does your clevis go on? What are the 3 speed control wires do? How do you know if this battery is right for your plane? What kind of propeller should go on your motor? You get the wrong one, the motor overheats and burns out that fast. How do all the controls go? What is up, down, left, right? How much throws do you need? LiPo batteries can be a little dangerous if you don't know how to use them. How do you charge them? How do you balance them? How do you get the most out of your money? These aren't hard things at all. There's just hundreds of them, and you have to know how to do every one. Picture a real pilot. What does he do before he leaves? He walks around his plane and does a flight check. He has a list. He knows what he's doing. You have to know what you're doing. So in summary, if you want to be flying by next weekend for pennies on the dollar, invest in the right plane, the right parts for the long run, maximize your fun, freedom, flying, and sense of accomplishment, you've got to know what plane to start with, what parts to get for it, how to make it all work. It's really that simple. Now, like I said, your ideal situation is you find somebody in your town that is into RC and that can mentor you through this like my mentors did for me. If you don't have anyone in your town, there's a lot of resources online, but that's the problem. There's a lot of resources online. Where do you start? This is why we created the Ultimate RC course. It's a virtual mentorship. Picture if you and I had a weekend together, this is what it would look like. First, we start with what kind of plane you want to get into. A ready to fly, a scratch build, what's going to fit right for your budget, what's going to be best for the long term, what kind of motor, battery, speed control, radio do you want to get, what kind of servos do you want to get, how do you put your plane together or modify it to make it stronger, what kind of foam, what kind of paint do you want to use, how do you install or double check everything, how do you set up the radio, the control throws, do you need a flight simulator, as well as a quick, easy easy 5-minute field repair kit, something we never go to the field without. The course also shows you how to do speed upgrades, how to do advanced wiring, KF airfoils for more aerobatics and stability, doing twin motors, your own flight testing, electric ducted fans, on and on and on. There's also an advanced wiring diagram section which shows you how to do the onboard mixers, the Elevon, the Delta, the spoileron, the flapperon, gyros. It keeps going. It's basically everything we've learned over the years. We put it all in one spot. The Ultimate RC course is basically the advanced section of our website. You get access to all of this information. There's photographs, diagrams, audio players, notes, links to parts, everything. And the course works on your computer, your phone, your device, everything. Once you get access to the course with the name and password, it's yours for life. It comes with 24 modules to start off right, covering everything you need to know from your first plane all the way to your first crash. The next set of modules are upgrades and hop-ups. The next section is the advanced wiring diagrams. And the final section is free bonuses, which have our 4 best-selling version 2 airplanes all included in the course. Now, they're PDF plans. What this allows you to do is get a jump start on getting your first plane in the air. It is the most for sure, guaranteed way to get in the air as fast as possible. In fact, if it doesn't produce those kind of results for you, you simply email us back, you get all of your money back, and you get to keep the course. How do you like that? So what you want to do right now is click on the Add to Cart button below the video, fill in your information, access to the course will be instantly emailed to you. There's nothing better than flying your very first plane, doing all the tricks and aerobatics, showing off to your friends. Please join us. Click on the Add to Cart button, fill out the information, and we'll continue this conversation on the other side.
Der Jetfliegerei in Österreich. MFC Intro Fans, wo alle diese Piloten herkommen und das Flugzeug sind. Natürlich der Morbitzer Edi, aber jetzt in der Luft Siegrechten, Franz Höllinger. So, liebe Fotografen, zückt eure Kameras. Ein tiefer Überflug. Ganz bitte. Und wieder kommt sie herein. Ganz tief. Unwahrscheinlich. Und jetzt fliegt die Concorde ein in den langen Endanflug.
Ja.
Die Landeklappen ausgefahren. Höchste Konzentration für den Piloten. Wahnsinn, ein bisschen Schuss bitte noch. Und eine Minute
Well, normally on mine, that plugs into my tank. There's a big plug in the tank, so I just push it back. Okay.
This slide film presentation will show you frightening techniques for airfield bird control. The most practical method combines bioacoustics, the use of bird distress calls, with pyrotechnics, the use of noise-making devices. The species vary, but birds are found on every Air Force base. Starlings are a common pest. Sparrows likewise. Grackles are found on every southern base as well as other parts of the country. Like the rest of the blackbird family, they are a common pest. There are others: pigeons, crows, gulls, waterfowl, geese, ducks. Birds can be a serious threat to flight operations. Airfield bird control is therefore a serious business. It depends first on the correct identification of the birds to be controlled. Those that most often threaten flight operations are flocking birds. In addition to knowing what birds threaten flight operations at a specific base, anyone responsible for bird control must know the most practical combination of bird frightening techniques: bioacoustics and pyrotechnics. There are other bird control methods that may be used as supporting measures, but have several limitations. For example, the use of bird models in dead or distressed positions. Unfortunately, some species soon catch on to the fact that the models represent no threat, while some species do not react at all. Because the birds soon become indifferent or habituated to the models must be moved frequently. Their use is recommended only to reinforce a combined bioacoustics and pyrotechnics frightening program. Birds are just as quick to catch on to the sound of noisy bird alarms, particularly if they always come from the same direction and from a fixed source. Ultrasonic devices are not effective. Birds hear sounds in the same range we do. Radio-controlled model aircraft are extremely effective in bird control, even more so when painted to resemble predators. Birds never lose their fear of these threatening machines, which can be used to herd flocks away from runway areas. But this is also only a supporting operation. It is also expensive and dependent on volunteer help. Falconry is extremely effective in bird control. Birds never lose their fear of this predator, but this is another expensive measure that depends on volunteer support. Falconry, therefore, remains only a good supplementary measure where available. Because of the limitations of all other bird frightening techniques, the Air Force Bird Control Program rests on bioacoustics and pyrotechnics. But these principal bird control measures are most effective when an airfield management program has made runway approach, landing, taxiway, and takeoff areas as unattractive as possible to flocking birds. Even after habitat modification to water-filled areas, landfills, and other sites attractive to birds, flocks will still occasionally return to settle on the field, no matter how unattractive it has been made. It then becomes necessary for those concerned with bird control, which may vary from one base to another, to apply the correct frightening techniques that will drive the birds from areas where they might interfere with flight operations. Correct bird control techniques include bioacoustics, which involves the recording of bird distress or alarm calls on tape. Every Air Force Base library of distress calls should include those for all species which emit distress calls and are in the area and threatening flight operations. Those birds must first be identified so that the correct distress tape can be selected to drive them off. The bioacoustic technique is somewhat limited to flocking birds that do give distress calls. This includes gulls, blackbirds, starlings, crows, and ravens. While there is a varying degree of response between blackbirds to some distress calls, all types of blackbirds might be dispersed by the distress call of any particular blackbird. The same is true for gulls. All types of gulls may respond to any specific gull distress call. Gulls and blackbirds may not always respond, however, to one particular distress call. In selecting tapes, it should be remembered that species-specific distress calls are always the most effective. In addition to a library of taped distress calls, an effective bird control program requires use of a small truck or van properly equipped for both bioacoustics and pyrotechnics. Sound equipment includes a tape deck and amplifier capable of producing recorded bird calls with distortion-free sound and at the proper volume. The truck carries a high-powered speaker or speaker array capable of reaching the birds with clearly reproduced distress calls. The vehicle is driven to within 100 to 200 meters of the birds and stopped. The truck is parked with the speaker facing the birds. The proper distress call is played for 15 to 20 seconds and then shut off. If within 20 seconds the birds have not moved, the distress call is played again. Do not repeat calls continuously. If recorded distress calls are played indefinitely, the birds will become habituated to the distress calls and ignore them. Not all birds respond to bioacoustics. When they do, their first response will often be to fly toward the sound source, circling it before moving off. This should not be discouraging, even though now, in flight, the birds may present a greater danger to aircraft than they did on the ground. If the birds are alert but do not fly in 2 to 3 cycles or flush and fly toward the sound, immediately begin to fire pyrotechnics. Pyrotechnics involves the use of noise-producing devices or techniques which frighten and effectively disperse the birds. The noise and an explosive flash is produced by a commercially available firecracker or scare cartridge fired from a standard M8 Very or flare pistol. This is included in the technical order, but must be modified to accept the 12-gauge cartridge with a locally manufactured steel sleeve insert. The Very pistol, with its steel sleeve insert, will fire the explosive charge 40 to 50 meters to produce a large noise and the explosive flash. This technique is highly effective in flushing flocks of birds and directing them toward a new location. Anyone working with pyrotechnic equipment should be trained in its use and wear proper safety gear, including ear protectors, safety glasses, and protective gloves. All safety procedures established in AFR 127-100 should be followed. The Very pistol should never be fired toward aircraft, buildings, or people. When fired, the shot should be placed to direct the birds away from the flight operations they threaten. For example, a scare cartridge exploded between the birds and an active runway will drive the flock in the desired direction, away from the runway. The same effect can be achieved from a greater distance by firing the scare cartridge with a standard open-bore 12-gauge shotgun. The shotgun will fire the scare cartridge for distances up to 100 meters, which may sometimes be an advantage. However fired, with the Very pistol or 12-gauge shotgun, the scare cartridge is often highly effective in flushing flocks of birds and directing them away from flight operations. Finally, in using either the pistol or shotgun, pick up any unexploded shells or other materials that might cause foreign object damage to aircraft. There are other devices and techniques for effective bird control than those already discussed and with which you should be familiar. Among these is another pyrotechnic device, the gas cannon. This is authorized in the Table of Allowances. It is a hollow tube that directs flame and sound from an explosion or blast of propane fired by a spark plug. The gas cannon may be fired from a raised platform and above any vegetation which might muffle the sound. The gas cannon is highly directional with an explosion, several times louder than the sound of a 12-gauge scare cartridge. It is effective over a 10-acre area, but unless the cannon is regularly moved, at least once a day, birds become habituated even to its loud noise and bright flash. The gas cannon is expensive to purchase but inexpensive to use. For example, to cover a C-5 runway effectively would require several cannon and their continuous movement. But the gas cannon is very effective against most species, particularly against waterfowl. Some warning words about all pyrotechnic methods used in bird control. They can be dangerous and destructive. Never use pyrotechnics without close coordination with the control tower to prevent bird interference with flight operations. Caution should be taken not to direct birds toward operating aircraft and to ensure safety. When using pyrotechnic devices of any kind, always stick with the safety procedures in Air Force Regulation 127-100. Now for some bad news. You should know that birds may respond to a combined and effective bird control and airport management program by leaving and staying away for 2 or 3 months. But they will often return to areas from which they've been frightened away. To reinforce the flock's desired response to standard frightening techniques, it may be necessary then to use a few rounds of live ammunition and kill 2 or 3 of a flock. But depredation permits are required from both state and federal governments to kill even one of most species. Depredation permits are not required for the European starling, the house sparrow, and the domestic pigeon. When shooting to kill unprotected birds or any others for which depredation permits have been secured, wear proper safety gear and follow all firearm safety procedures. Live ammunition should be used during flight operations only when absolutely necessary, and then with extreme caution. Safest time for the use of live ammunition is during non-flying hours, early in the morning or on weekends. In any case, always be certain there are no aircraft, buildings, or people in your line of fire. Aim to hit only a bird in flight, preferably one from the center of the flock. In that way, all birds in the flock may see one of their number fall. Some of the flock will fly in to circle over and confirm the kill, but the flock will disperse, their fear of gunshot noises reinforced. You will have noted by now that the birds most effectively controlled are game birds, or flocking birds which have distress calls, and have learned to associate gunshot noise with danger. You should remember that even though all flocking birds will occasionally return to well-managed and unattractive areas from which they have been driven off, a persistent, diverse, well-managed bird control program will greatly reduce their threat to flight operations at any Air Force base. Persistence is the word for effective bird control. A combination of bioacoustics and pyrotechnics supported by a continuing base program of habitat modification. Effective bird control on any Air Force base involves the ongoing support and cooperation of all concerned with the safety of flight operations.
Rove 1, cleared number 1, bird condition yellow. Use caution. Standard departure.
No bird control measures should be undertaken without coordinating with the tower to determine when, where, and what bird control measures will be planned. The end is well worth the effort. The safety of Air Force pilots and planes in flight at every Air Force base, and there's help to keep them safe. The BASH office is only a phone call away to give you information and assistance you may need for any problem you may have with bird control. So is the Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service office nearest you. There's an office in every state. They're all listed in the Bird Aircraft Strike Hazard, or BASH, guidance package, which gives you all the information you need to get into the serious business of effective bird control. Effective bird control. It's up to you.